Hello and welcome to Scale Military Models. In this episode, I will be building Tamiya's 35th scale JagdTiger. Overall, it is a very flawless kit and I enjoyed building it. If you're interested in this kit, check out my review. Now let's get on to the build. As per usual, starting off with the lower hull. The fit here was excellent and left barely any seam lines. The wheels are about 3 parts each and each had a poly cap for easy removal when painting. The entire lower hull went together very smoothly. This particular type of JagdTiger features a Henschel production type suspension with 9 overlapping road wheels. Tamiya has done an amazing job representing this. This particular vehicle has no rear fenders, so we made some modifications by cutting off the fender hinges and placing plastic card there. I sanded off the remaining plastic. I then glued on 6 photo etch hinges to replace the 12 that I had just removed. Now moving on to the gun breech. This part of the kit featured very nice details, although it did not include important parts such as the shell racks or other details in the interior. For this reason, I kept the hedges closed. The doors themselves were very nicely detailed for those who want to have them open. The door hinges went together very nicely and opened and closed very smoothly. This will make it much easier when painting. The welds on this kit are not very detailed, so I decided to replace them using my 1.5mm scriber. The welds themselves were replicated using Tamiya epoxy putty and a custom tool. I unfortunately lost the footage for this. I've referenced a lot to Night Shift's welding tutorial. It was very informative and I highly recommend you check it out. The initial texturing was done with a brush dipped in Tamiya extra thin cement. I did about 2 layers of this. I also made sure to give it a texture rather than just a continuous long brush stroke, because this would be unrealistic, so I stippled the glue on instead. I focused this heavily on the gun mantelet, which was a thick cast steel and had a heavy texture. This was followed up by Tamiya gray putty, stippled up in the same motion. I then added more details such as the engine cover. In looking at photos of the tank, you can see that it has no tools. Despite this, I decided to add a fire extinguisher. The screens on the engine deck were attached using Loctite gel super glue, applied using a wire. When closely examining historical photos, I found multiple shell impacts in the front plate and gun mantle. After finding the exact location, I drilled them out with a pin vise. Judging by the size and depth of the impact, I'm guessing this was either made by an American 76 or 90mm gun. Here you can see the impact right above this man's head. I then proceeded to carve out the edges using a knife. I then used grade putty to create the shape and texture of the impact. Using the back of a paintbrush, I can create the shape and lip of the impact. The final result is pretty good considering it was only my second attempt. A second impact in the front glacis heavily damaged the gun cradle, tearing off this portion which holds the barrel. So I marked the area I needed to remove. After examining historical photos, I noticed that the cradle mounts were about 2mm too high on the kit. I then proceeded to cut these off and lower them. The only option for this kit is to have the tow hooks on, and it can clearly be seen in historical photos that my JagdTiger only has one tow hook on the front left of the vehicle. I proceeded to drill this out so that I could have it empty. And finally, after a while of waiting, the metal gun barrel arrived. This is a major upgrade considering the plastic part had no right flank and had massive seam lines. The barrel is made up of two pieces, each nicely detailed and accurately represented. I know I could have used the kit part, but in the end, this was the way to go. The barrel fit nicely into the breech and looked great with the gun shield on. This vehicle does not have any tools, so I filled all the holes with Vallejo plastic putty and then sanded them down once it had dried. Like the tools, this vehicle had no fenders, so the fender brackets had to be drilled out. Instead of using the kit supplied tracks, I used these ones from Full Model. This was one of my best decisions of the build. They went together very nicely and had great detail. The JagdTiger's tracks include an A and B part track, one with pleats and one without. Majority of the links were perfect and had no flash. These are a few examples of ones that did. They could easily be cleaned up, and it was not an issue in the end. To assemble the tracks, simply just put them together and then place the wire in it. I found it easiest to use my clippers to push it down into the hole. Luckily, I did not have to drill up any of the links. Once the wire has gone all the way down, you can cut it. This process needs to be repeated roughly 200 times. There were a few times, as you can see here, when I accidentally bent the wire when trying to push it in. This is likely because I was not pushing it at a straight angle, or there was a little bit of debris in the hole. This can easily be fixed by pushing harder once you bend it back into a straight line. To ensure that the wire has gone all the way down, look closely for the reflection in between the links. Here I used a piece of tape on the wire to show its movement. When assembling large amounts of tracks, I actually found it easier to put a piece of wire in a pin vise and then drill through the hole. This is much easier when the links are under tension because of its weight, especially when connecting large quantities of tracks. When I was nearly done, I frequently checked how many more links I needed to add. And for some odd reason, I decided to do the other wheels and drive sprockets at the end. No idea why, I just held it off till now. They went together very nicely regardless and included a poly cap. Once all the necessary links were attached, I assembled the tracks. Like previously, I used my pin vise to drill in the track pin. This was much easier, especially since they were under a lot of stress right now. I am sorry that you can't see very well. Each track link only had one open end, and the last two, I opened up both ends so that the wire could pass through. I did this so that I could have one end with a right angle so the pin can easily be removed for painting. Since I wasn't using the kit supplied fenders, I had to remove this piece of plastic which would attach them. I probably should have done this before I attached the tracks, but I forgot until now. Here I use my 1.5mm chisel to remove every other hinge so that the metal fenders can fit nicely. Just like the other photo etch, the fenders were a part of Aber's set. Here you can see I'm trying to damage and bend them to make them look more realistic. I hollowed out the tip of the machine gun barrel using my hobby knife. And with that, the build is done. Thanks for watching.